Now, Matric results are out, schools are back full-time, and while the COVID-19 virus is still very much with us, there are plans to keep learning going. So what can those planning or enrolling or even continuing their studies at university expect? In the February budget, the Minister cut funding to tertiary education. Already, there are distress calls from students trying to access loans through the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Let's look at all of this now with Professor Francis Petersen, Rector and Vice-Chancellor at the University of the Free State. Good evening, Professor. So, officially, universities can sort of get cracking with students from next week, but it's a bit of a mixed bag because everyone's timing it slightly differently. But either way, what can students expect when they go back? Is it going to be very different from pre-COVID days?
Good evening, Sally, and good evening to the viewers. Yes, depending on how universities have finished their 2020 academic year, for 2021, universities could decide when they want to start their academic year. So some universities starting next week, others might start a little bit later. At the University of the Free State, we have decided that we're going to bring our senior undergraduate students back and also postgraduates on the 1st of March. So that was on Monday. And then the first years will start on the 15th of March. But most universities, and in particular our case, we have decided that we're going to follow, at least for the first semester of 2021, a blended model. So there are going to be classes that's going to be face-to-face, and those students will come into campus. And again, although the lockdown levels has been eased, we're still very careful and cautious about the third wave. So we bring those students back in different batches. So it's like block of classes that's been provided for those face-to-face students. But most of the other learners or other students will follow an online approach where we carry on what we have done during the course of 2020, and hopefully with more learnings that we have and experience that we have gathered.
Sure. What about students who live on campus? So they will also do some of their classes then from their rooms. Is that how it's going to work?
Well, those students that are on campus are typically the students that we have invited back to come and have face-to-face classes. So we don't have all students back on our residences. So they are allowed to go to the classes, and then obviously they could study in their residence rooms. But we will later during the semester will decide to what extent we could open up the whole campus so that more students come back. So at the moment, there are limited numbers of students in the residences, and those that are in the residences are students that will have to attend face-to-face classes.
All right. Let's look at students who need financial help. We are already hearing distressing stories about students with historical debt unable to register, and therefore they're unable to lock this year's tranche of NSFAS funding. It seems somewhat unfair to be penalising these students, particularly as learning was so disrupted last year, and they perhaps didn't get the full benefit. What is your thinking on what needs to change to make this system more streamlined and not to push youngsters who clearly have the talent, who clearly want to study, out of the system?
Yeah. So, Sally, this is a very complicated situation, and probably also warrants a very complicated response, which I'm going to try to see whether I can simplify it a bit. I think the NSFAS model, for me, need to get a massive rethink. A couple of years ago, the Vice-Chancellors in fact challenge the sustainability of the model. And I think that in itself is a subject on its own. We can't fix it now, it's there, but we will have to work during the course of this year to make sure that we try to look at how sustainable we can make a financial model for financing students. But in terms of where we're sitting now, and not all universities have got the same approach of doing it. At the University of the Free State, we got a pro-poor approach in terms of looking at those students. So those students that might have debt owed in 2020, but they have qualified for NSFAS funding in 2021, we will register those students and we will deal with their debt in a different way.
There is a certain amount of power that the institution has. Very quickly, because we are out of time, but we do know that there were budget cuts for tertiary education. How hard is that going to bite?
Well, I must say at the moment we haven't seen that through the budget of the Department of Education and Training. That might come, but we as universities, we will just have to be prudent in our finance. We will have to have a business approach in terms of managing our expenses. We will have to look at savings, and then we have to make sure that where there are other income streams that we could find to supplement the government funding, we will have to do that. So it's going to be a total different look of how do you running the university on business principles to be able to make it financially sustainable going forward.
Well, good luck to you and also the students as the new academic year gets underway properly in the week ahead. Thank you very much. That was Professor Francis Petersen, Rector and Vice-Chancellor at the University of the Free State.